Good evening. I'm Kathy Vaness, General Manager of the Golden Door, and I'm so excited to be sitting here tonight. Oh my gosh, Arianna Huffington, on my checklist to get to talk to you. I could have never imagined this would happen. Arianna is the co-founder and editor-in-chief of the Pulitzer Prize-winning Huffington Post. Nationally syndicated columnist, a radio host, an author of 15 books. And this year she's been busy promoting her latest book on the sleep revolution, transforming your life one night at a time, which follows closely on the heels of her last bestseller, New York Times bestseller Thrive, which I have read both of these books. And I would highly recommend reading these books if you can. This is going to be a wonderful evening. I'm going to open up tonight with, you've mentioned many times in your books and interviews that your mom was your biggest influence. How can you describe that influence, and how did that influence shape you as a mom?
Well, first of all, I'm so happy to be here. It's been an amazing week, and thank you for creating this incredible place for all of us to come and recharge and restore ourselves. I actually had brought my mother here many, many years ago, and this week I brought my daughter, my youngest daughter, here. And I feel this is, and I know there are other mothers and daughters here, and it's just such an incredible environment to experience with your children, because you have this uninterrupted walks and meals and times together. And my mother was the foundation of everything in my life. You know, she brought up my sister and me in Athens, Greece, in a one-bedroom apartment. We had no money. Believing that we could do anything, that we could aim for the stars. And the most important thing was that if we failed, she wouldn't love us any less, and it didn't matter. She had this approach to failure, which was absolutely amazing. She used to say, failure is not the opposite of success, it's a stepping stone to success. And so she gave us that sense that we could take risks, we could fail along the way, and she would be there.
And you're the same way, I take it then, as your
And
daughter is quite
the same way with
incredible.
my daughters. I feel, you know, my Isabella, who's here with me, wanted to be an artist. And a lot of parents would say, oh, well, my God, how are you going to make a living? And I felt, just be an artist, and it's not going to be easy. She still lives with me, which is great.
You started meditating when you were, I think, almost 13?
Again, it was my mother.
With your mother. And I read one of the things that you wrote in one of your books, that the Dalai Lama says that sleep is the best meditation. Do you still meditate today?
Oh, yes, absolutely. But what was interesting is that when I was growing up, my mother revered sleep. And she would say, if you get enough sleep, everything will be better. Your grades, your health, and your happiness. She sounded like a modern scientist, because modern scientists say that now. But then when I moved to England and then to New York, I kind of bought into the collective delusion that in order to succeed, you have to burn out along the way.
Like a lot of us.
Like a lot of us. And it wasn't until I collapsed from exhaustion and sleep deprivation 9 years ago and hit my head on my desk, broke my cheekbone. And that's what started me on this new journey to understand the new science around sleep and the importance of recharging, and to write Thrive. And then when I went around the world speaking about Thrive, I found that the one thing everybody wanted to talk about, you know, there were people who might not want to meditate or do any of the other things, but everybody had to sleep. And many people had a problematic relationship with sleep. So I decided to sort of delve deeper into just that one subject.
Well, that sort of is a perfect question, because you've candidly talked about your own challenges with managing time and prioritizing the demands of your career, which we all have, and raising 2 daughters, which every working mom who has children and who has to work has those challenges. But we mentor women every day. What do you think, what would you say to them, or what do you say to them when they ask, can they have it all?
Well, what I say is that women need to learn to put their own oxygen mask first before they try to do everything else. I think we have done it wrong for so long, like thinking that we're going to be great at work, great at home, and then take whatever crumbs of time and energy are left for ourselves. And the truth is that we are actually shortchanging everything when we do that, because there's now so much evidence about the connection between productivity and performance and sleep and recharging, and so much new understanding about our mental health and sleep and recharging, that we just have to revise a lot of the delusions that have actually driven our lives.
Right. And what it took to be successful may not be what we thought.
Exactly. And you know what I love? I love the fact that athletes are ahead of the game, because they are all about performance. They're now increasingly prioritizing these things and then measuring their stats. I mean, I have a whole section on athletes and sleep, like Andre Iguodala from the Golden State Warriors. He literally tracked his sleep, and when he started getting 8 hours sleep, he started tracking his stats, and the improvements were so phenomenal. Kobe Bryant, another one, LeBron James, that it's clear that the idea that we're going to pull all-nighters and because we're so committed to our work means that the next day we're going to be like zombies. And now we know that the cognitive equivalent of sleep deprivation is like being drunk. But we need to change so much. We need to change so much around congratulating people for working 24/7, which is the equivalent to congratulating people for coming to work drunk.
No, it's true.
So there is a lot of language that has to change, a lot of cultural practice at work, but it is changing. That's what's so exciting. We're in the middle of this transition.
So I'm going to ask you a few more questions. The Huffington Post was the first commercially run United States digital media enterprise to win a Pulitzer in 2012. Where were you when you received that honor? And what was your first thought? Because that's pretty spectacular. It had to be a super high point in your career.
I was in the newsroom, and we had a fantastic, we brought everybody from the newsroom together. We opened champagne. It was for a story that we were very proud of. It was a 10-part series on the lives of returning vets and the trauma of returning from war and what it did to the families and the communities. But it was also a great moment for journalism, because it became clear to everyone that you could do great journalism online, you could do great journalism in print. There was no longer a real distinction, and that was really a turning point.
But you thought of it sort of first, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, you really took digital media and digital news really right out to mainstream.
For me, what was really the most important thing about the Huffington Post from day one, which was May 9th, 2005, was to be at the same time a publisher with professional journalists, investigative journalists, and a platform. And that was really what was different. As a publisher, you know, we would do more traditional journalism. As we continue to do, we now have 850 journalists, editors in 15 countries soon. I was telling all our Mexican friends on September 1st we are launching in Mexico, so I hope you're going to come to the launch. But at the same time, I'm just as excited about the fact that we're a platform. So I want to invite all of you, I already invited Kimberly, to write about your experiences, your stories, to share all that. I think that is what is so special about new media, that it's not just consuming journalism, it's about producing it. And some of our most shared stories are not written by our staff. They're written by bloggers, contributors, whatever you want to call them, who just want to write about something that's important to them.
That's fantastic.
And that for me is so exciting. We have over 100,000 people who write on the Huffington Post. They have their own password once we trust them, because it's not a free-for-all, so that it's kind of curated. But we invite people, or people submit things, and once we know that it's not going to be ad hominem attacks or anything like that. They have a password they can write whenever they want.
Fabulous. In your book, Thrive, a New York Times bestseller, you refine success beyond the two factors of money and power. I love this. You wrote about the 4 pillars: well-being, wonder, wisdom, and giving. I love this new definition because it sort of aligns with what we believe at the Golden Door. But is it possible you could take those 4 pillars and do sort of a quick synopsis of what each of them are for our guests?
Yes, so basically when I talked about redefining success, I meant to take it beyond the first 2 metrics of just money and power / status, because we know that these are like trying to sit on a 2-legged stool. Sooner or later you fall off. You know, they are not enough to sustain your life. Right. And so the third metric that has these 4 pillars, well-being, of course, it's the foundation, it's everything you are doing here, it's what you are about, nothing is worth sacrificing your health to. So we all know people in our lives, maybe we are one of them, I definitely was, that in the process of achieving and getting things done, sacrifice their health, their joy. That's another thing which I think is incredibly important to me, and that takes us into wonder. So often life becomes about going through your to-do list, getting stuff done, checking the boxes, and in the process we miss out on the joy. And
well, you said that. I love that idea of releasing the baggage.
Yes.
That's great, because sometimes we have all these goals, right? And they're sort of on our list of things that we have to do in our life, and sometimes they hold us back.
Well, yes, I love doing regular kind of life audits and seeing which of my goals am I really still invested in, and which, they could be big or small. Am I ready to, I have this phrase, you can complete a project by dropping it.
I read that. I love that. I think
So,
that's good. Check.
Check. I all my life I wanted to learn to be a good skier. I'm a lousy skier. I wanted to learn to cook. I can't cook, as I told the wonderful chef Greg. And then there came a moment when I said, you know what, I'm never going to invest enough time and energy to be a good skier or to learn to cook. So as far as I'm concerned, skiing is done and cooking is done.
You once mentioned if you didn't have intuitiveness, you could not be successful. And without creativity, there is no innovation. So at what point in your life, where were you in your life when you innovated and imagined the Huffington Post?
Well, for me, it started with recognizing that the conversation was moving online, but that a lot of people that I admired, whose work I like to read, would never actually go online and create their own blog. And I wanted to create a place where they could write. And I remember the first person I invited to blog. Remember, at the time, blogging was seen as something that young people in their pajamas were doing in their parents' basement because they couldn't get a job. So I remember calling Arthur Schlesinger, the famous historian, and asking him if he would be one of my first bloggers. And he said to me, "What's blogging?" And so I started explaining, and he said, "Let me take you to lunch, and you can tell me about it." So he took me to lunch to a club in New York, the Century Club, which was so old-fashioned, and I thought it was so funny that I'm sitting here describing blogging to Arthur Schlesinger. And he said to me, "Well, I don't really use a computer, but I can fax you my blogs." I said, "Fine, I'll take them. You can send them by carrier pigeon." In fact, one of the services we started providing was to have people, especially who live in California and drive a lot, call in to one of our editors and dictate their blogs. And it was kind of amazing because suddenly, Larry David, he's dictated every single blog. He would call from the set or from the car and say, "Can you believe what happened?" Whatever. People would get angry about something or excited about something, and he would just dictate it. And so we just created this concierge service. And so the first day we launched, we had these amazing bloggers, from Ellen DeGeneres and Ari Emanuel, and Arthur Schlesinger and Walter Cronkite, and suddenly blogging began to be seen as something mixed, always mixed up with people nobody had heard of, because that's what I love. No hierarchy. If you have something interesting to say, you can say it, and you can be next to a prime minister or a president of a college, it doesn't matter. In fact, we had an amazing blog from a homeless teenager who wrote this beautiful piece, and the Harvard admissions office happened to read it, and they gave him a place, and he's now in his third year at Harvard. It's one of my favorite stories of how that's one of the magical things that happens online. You never know who's going to read it. I mean, we've had people sell books, TV series, all just by writing something which people loved, and commissioned them to do something from which they made money. And
so where do you see it going? What's the next step?
Well,
what's going to happen to the world of newspapers versus the world of digital media, which is so instant?
Well, right now there's a convergence. Like the best papers, like what the Washington Post has been doing ever since it was bought by Jeff Bezos, has been amazing. They've done great things on the digital front. There's really no real distinction now between the best papers that understand the digital world and the new media companies that know that they're also going to do investigative journalism, they're going to cover big stories. And the distinction that existed when we launched the Huffington Post is no longer as pronounced.
Interesting. Well, I love your book, The Sleep Revolution, Transforming Your Life One Night at a Time. This is such an important message on health and wellness, clearly in our society today. You've talked about adults not getting enough sleep. Let's take it a step back. Let's start with the children. And does it start with the children? Are the children sort of working families today losing that ability to build a natural habit that they may have had before?
I think it does start with children, and it also starts with our addiction to technology. And of course, children like us are very addicted to technology.
Even more so, don't you think?
And well, yes, because they're like native to it. And so I feel that it's so important for families to establish boundaries, but to do it in a way which is not punitive, and to role model it. Because so often, I have friends with young children, and they will say to them, turn off your phone, don't bring your phone to bed, or don't bring your phone to dinner, and then they will surreptitiously look at texts, under the table or something. Obviously, that's the behavior that children are modeling. So one of the things that I recommend is in fact, I want to manufacture that. Maybe we'll do it together. To create like a little family bed for phones. And you put it in the living room. And it becomes a ritual from the moment your child has a phone, this is the place where
it's the phone home.
The phone home. You should design it so that they can look like little beds for the phones. You can have a little cover over them, and the mommy and the daddy and the children put their phones in bed outside the rooms. That is the one non-negotiable thing. I hope if I can help add one tiny thing to your amazing week here is please never sleep with your phone on your nightstand. It's kryptonite. It basically means that with your best intentions, if you wake up in the middle of the night, for whatever reason, you are going to be tempted to go to your phone, especially if you can't get back to sleep right away. And that completely affects your sleep cycle, it affects your ability to go deeper and truly recharge, and it's just so not worth it. So, I mean, I can go through all the excuses people have,
totally,
but I need to wake up in the morning. I use my phone as my alarm clock. Well, first of all, Pottery Barn, $35, great looking, vintage looking alarm clocks that I give to all my friends for Christmas and holidays. But also, when you get enough sleep, you don't need an alarm to wake up. You may still set the alarm as a kind of safety, but you wake up without an alarm, and it's the most amazing feeling, as you all know, when you wake up without an alarm. because you have completed all the sleep cycles and you're fully restored.
Well, do you think, and you talked a lot about sleep rituals with adults, but as we move it to the adults, do you think that we've lost the sleep rituals with children? The idea of storytelling, the idea of quiet time. It's like, or is that something that we have to help bring back?
Parents still, most parents, still do that with their very young children. But then it becomes harder and harder when they get older. But I think that's partly because we still have not really updated our views about the importance of sleep. I feel where we are now with sleep is where we were in the 60s with smoking. Like in the 60s, the science was completely clear that tobacco was killing us. But you'd be amazed to see ads from the 60s of doctors in white coats advertising cigarettes. And I was looking at these ads the other day, and there was one of them. The doctor said, "I smoke menthols because they refresh my throat." And so, we are at this place now. The science, that's why if you read the book, I urge you not to skip the science chapter. That's the key chapter. It has like all the latest scientific findings that show the connection between every aspect of our health, from the common cold and obesity to cancer, heart disease, and Alzheimer's.
Well, they're saying, of course, that today the lack of sleep actually leads to obesity.
Yes, well, that is what is so interesting.
One of the key points in one of your, and I thought that's something that people probably don't understand. I'm going to stay awake.
So many people think that they'll wake up early. A lot of driven executives. I'm looking at you guys there. Our private equity group. A lot of executives just feel that, because we're so driven and so type A, well, I'll set the alarm for 5 and I'll hit the gym and then I'll go to the office. And last year we had many people collapsing on their treadmills, and either, like the CEO of United Airlines with a massive heart attack, he's back at his job with a heart transplant. The head of M&A at JP Morgan dying on his treadmill. So many stories because we have convinced the world, whether people do it or not, that exercise and nutrition are important. But the third pillar is sleep. And if you sacrifice your sleep to exercise, the truth is that there are these hormones that are activated in you which make you crave all the wrong things like sugars and bad carbs. So in fact, it makes it much harder to maintain or lose weight.
So you've mentioned if I could say 3 things to our guests tonight that they should not do before they go to sleep. And certainly one is to take away the technology. What are 2 others?
Well, let me just be positive and say 2 other things to do instead of not to do. It's very important to create our own ritual for sleep, the way we have a ritual for our children when they are young. And the second part of the book is all sorts of best practices and tips and techniques to help you create your own ritual. And I can tell you mine. Mine starts with 30 minutes before I'm going to go to sleep. I turn off all my devices and gently escort them out of my bedroom. Then I have a hot bath. For me, my hot bath with Epsom salts and a flickering candle nearby, because I believe in rekindling the romance with sleep, is like my ritual for allowing my brain to slow down. The problem and what wakes up in the middle of the night and we can't go back to sleep easily is not our bodies. Our bodies are still tired. It's our brains. We haven't given them the opportunity to slow down. So water for me is like a purification ritual, kind of washing away the day. And if you don't like baths, have a shower. Whatever it is, this is such an important demarcation line between the day and the night. And then another thing is I'm a big believer in dedicated sleep clothes, that make you feel good. I used to sleep in my T-shirts and the same stuff I wore to the gym. And now, and mostly, you know, women, let's be frank, normally we only buy beautiful lingerie at the beginning of a love affair, not even the middle of a love affair. So if we can think of it as a love affair with sleep and having dedicated clothes, making the time for sleep something that we look forward to rather than something that we want to postpone as long as possible. I never read anything in bed except physical books and books that have nothing to do with work, you know, novels or poetry or philosophy. And if you read The Sleep Revolution in bed and put you to sleep, I will consider it a personal victory. And the final thing I do, I know I'm giving you more than two, but is doing a gratitude list. Because you can decide what you're going to give the closing scene of the day to. You know, every day and every life, even the most blessed, consists of great things happening and setbacks and challenges. And so the question is, what are you going to put at the top of your mind before you go to sleep? The bad things or the good things?
Well, you do one other thing. Talk about the little bowls with the notes. I love that. There's this wonderful part in the story, and I actually think that's sort of freeing because you can just take it off your mind.
Oh yeah, to write down everything.
Write down, and then you have special little bowls.
To write down everything that you need to do the next day.
And tuck it away in a little bowl.
And just and put it away so that it's, you know, it's out of your mind, and everything will still be there in the morning.
Right. I think that's a great idea. Scientists are confirming what ancestors instinctually knew. It's in your research that sleep brings overnight cleaning crews to clean the toxic waste proteins that accumulate between the brain cells during the day. Walk us through the stages of sleep. Is that always during the sleep as you did your research, or is that a certain time during the sleep?
Well, there are these 4 sleep cycles. But the piece of research that you mentioned is actually one that I find one of the most amazing. It's a very recent piece of research by a human sleep scientist, Dr. Nedergaard. They discovered that, contrary to what we thought, sleep is actually a time of frenetic activity. We used to think that sleep was like putting your car in the garage and turning the ignition key off. And now we know that it's the time when all the accumulated toxins of the day are washed away from the brain. And the brain, as she says, has only 2 states. It can either be awake and alert or asleep and cleaning up. And she uses metaphors beautifully. She said, you can either entertain the guests or clean up the house. So basically that means that if you don't give your brain enough time to do all that cleanup, this waste accumulates among the cells of the brain, and that's the beginning of Alzheimer's. So you see there is a direct correlation between the epidemic of sleep deprivation and the epidemic of Alzheimer's. So it's just such an amazing piece of research, and it's relatively new.
Yeah, I found that sort of concept that it's a cleaning process really interesting, almost like a dishwasher.
Yes.
Which is what you, right?
Like a dishwasher.
Like a dishwasher. At the Golden Door, we don't have televisions in our rooms. And we get sometimes a lot of pushbacks, oh my gosh, we don't have televisions, what are we going to do at night? And we know that people bring their computers and they stream or they Netflix, or, you know, we heard one woman was watching, you know, a Marilyn Monroe movie while she was here. She thought that was so glamorous. But doesn't that have the same impact on you?
Well, it does before you go to sleep.
Right?
You know, if you want to skip a yoga class and go watch a movie, but after dinner, I feel, especially at a time like this, which is a time of real recharging and restoration, is the time to get into bed with a good book, or write letters, or do things that have no screens. And it's not just, people talk a lot now about the blue light that screens let off. Apple has brought out Night Shift, a feature that turns the blue light into a more orange light. And all these are good palliative things. But the bottom line is no screens.
That's right. and we see that here, even on digital technology. When it's Sunday and the guests first arrive, they're almost in higher stress withdrawal to not go to those apparatuses, to learn how to detach. And by Wednesday, they sort of get, oh my gosh, I get it, I'm putting it away. But how do we get that out in the real world? I mean, this is sort of an enclave in a very special place. But the truth is, in order to separate yourself, you have to separate yourself.
Well, I think it's really important for companies to have different programs for employees. At the Huffington Post, for example, we introduced a new holiday email program, which I learned from Daimler. You know, ironically, Germany, a lot of companies in Germany are ahead of US companies in introducing these things. So Daimler introduced this program, which we've adopted, and any employee at the Huffington Post can basically opt in when they go on vacation. So if you emailed me when I was on vacation in Greece last summer, you would have gotten an email that said, Arianna is on vacation. If this is urgent, contact her chief of staff and give his email. If it is not, email her after August 11th. This email will be deleted. This is
I like that.
an
I like the
amazing
delete part.
thing if you think of it, because right now what do? We put an out of office.
Yeah.
And how often don't you get an email from the person who's out of office you just got, responding to your email 5 minutes later? Because once we see the email, we feel like compelled to answer it. I had 2 weeks with 0 in my email box.
Well, and that's also the stress that wouldn't be there when you got back. You wouldn't have 100 emails to answer if it just automatically
No,
deleted.
and also because most
That's the good
yes,
part.
and also most
I like
things
that.
and most things get handled.
Exactly. It's not going to fall apart.
They're not the things. Nothing fell apart. I felt very humbled. You know, everything went on without me. You know.
So I read that, of course, someone asked you, what app do you use? Oh my gosh, that was an easy question. Because your answer would be, of course, the Huffington Post app, which made sense. So I want to ask you, now that your technology is not in your room and it's not with you, what are the apps that you regularly use? I think that'd be an interesting question. What do you
But
use
you mean
outside?
not in my bedroom.
Not in your bedroom, of course. Definitely not in your bedroom.
So I love Headspace. Have you tried Headspace? It's a meditation app, and it's really wonderful. I think I love it. I love a lot of news apps. You know, not just the Huffington Post, but I look at Vox and Politico and multiple news apps, especially now in an election year. And I find that when I'm online, I'm very sort of targeted. You know, I'm kind of working. I'm not surfing as much.
You have a point. You're looking
Yeah.
for something specific. So what's next? What's next for Arianna?
So what's next is I want to do, obviously, keep growing the Huffington Post, but also I want to take these messages of Thrive into corporations and help companies transform their cultures, both here and around the world. It's such a global problem. In China, you know, over 100 million people are suffering from mental health problems that are burnout and stress related. And now more and more companies are recognizing the connection between bringing these wellness programs into the workplace and the impact on the bottom line. And one of the pioneers has been Mark Bertolini at Aetna. He measured through Duke University the impact of these programs, and in the first year they found a 7% reduction in healthcare costs and a 62-minute a week improvement in productivity. So what he did now, in fact too late to include in my book, but I'm including it in the paperback, is he introduced a sleep program at Aetna, which is that they're giving all employees Fitbits, and the ones who choose to opt into the program and measure their sleep and get 7 hours or more for 20 nights, they don't even have to be consecutive, get $300.
Wow.
Now just
so
think of it, it's
interesting.
not just the financial incentive, it's the fact that you have a big public company
Right. Have a better
that
society.
says, that if you get enough sleep, if you take care of yourself, this is not just good for you, this is good for the bottom line of this company.
I hope you've enjoyed this, but at the end of every interview, we ask our guests a very special question. And it's what I'm going to ask you tonight. And it's what is the golden nugget you could leave our guest tonight?
What is
the golden nugget that you could leave our guest tonight?
So my golden nugget is that no matter how magnificent our life and our job and what we do in the world is, I believe there is something in each one of us that is more magnificent still.